Good evening, everyone. A couple minutes and we'll get rolling. Alrighty, give it about one more minute and then I'll get started. There's 4 of us right now. I'm going to wait just to see if anybody else pops on in the next 30 seconds and then we'll get rolling. Alrighty, make sure this is recording. Alrighty. So I am really excited to chat with y'all tonight. We're going to talk a little bit about emotional eating tonight and what all that means. I kind of went out of order here because based on a lot of the feedback I was getting on some of our individual coaching calls, this felt like something that was really pertinent to kind of talk about and develop some tools and strategies for how to overcome emotional eating and actually change our habits and routines related to emotional eating. So we will still have some other habits that we're working on in tandem with this unit. But I just felt like, this time of year, even especially, I think can bring up a lot of different emotions and situations where we might experience some different emotional eating scenarios. So I felt maybe this might be the most valuable time that we could get into it. So the skills that I want us to work on over the next couple of weeks, skills are a little bit different than habits. They are similar in that we have to practice both of them, but skills are things that are going to kind of transcend multiple levels and layers of who we are, whereas habits are very black and white, like did I do it, yes or no. So skills this week that I want us to start thinking about are identifying our different triggers and routines. And that's all we're going to talk about tonight is kind of what are the cues, what are the things that are driving some of our behaviors that we associate with being negative. So we'll identify them and then we'll start developing strategies for the routine that's going to provide same sort of experience, relief, reward that we're used to feeling and doing that particular behavior. Usually it's food related in what we're referencing right now. That's kind of what we're talking about tonight. So once we get through all of the information that I have, those are going to be the skills that we're working on over the next 2 weeks, is just implementing them. In terms of habits this week, it's kind of just building on learning how to create a balanced plate and continuing on our meal prep strategies and building nourishing, tasty foods and meals for ourselves. So this next 2 weeks, I want us to try and make sure that we are including a healthy fat with every meal. So we've worked on eating slowly, chewing our food to mush, stopping at 80% full. We've worked on including a protein and a veggie with every meal. We should still be working on all 4 of those habits. And now we're going to add on top, making sure that every meal we eat as many as we can, right? Not perfection here, but just intention and doing as best we can to get a healthy fat with every meal. So again, reference back to that good, better, best options of what your healthy fats look like and how we could start implementing those into our meals throughout the next 2 weeks and hopefully for the rest of our life. I kind of mentioned in that first conversation that we had why we want healthy fats, but remember they are so important into just the function of our body, but also making our meals taste good, providing enough calories and nutrients for us to feel good from meal to meal without feeling like we're dipping low on energy. They kind of just help us stay stable throughout the day, not getting too high, not getting too low, and definitely provide flavor and a little bit of excitement in our meals. So that's going to be the habit for the next 2 weeks. You're going to add that onto your habit tracker and just continue checking off every day that you get your protein, that you get veggies, that you get you're chewing your food slowly, you're stopping at 80% fullness. Anything else that you want to throw in there too, like I know some of us have mentioned that water is an issue, like getting enough water in the day. So add that to a column there, and every time you drink your goal water consumption, add that on. Mindset, and this is kind of where we'll segue into our lesson this evening. A mindset is just to kind of think about, are we eating for nourishment or are we eating to solve or avoid an emotion? So just kind of like flipping the script a little bit and asking ourselves why we're eating a meal. Are we hungry? Are we doing it out of habit, out of routine? Are we doing it out of necessity? And that this is the only time of day that I have time to eat, even if I'm not completely hungry. It's not whether those things are good or bad. It's all about just bringing awareness so that we can, in certain situations where we don't want to be doing that thing, we can start creating that level of awareness so we can start to develop some strategies to not participate in that behavior anymore. So I know I've thrown this example out before, but with regard to emotional eating, it can cover a gauntlet of different type of emotions, right? Boredom is an emotion, sadness, happiness, celebration, stress, big one. All of those things are different emotions, and they all kind of come under the same umbrella of emotional eating. And what emotional eating is it's essentially just a habit. It's a response to a certain stressor, whether it's good, bad, actual stress, that we've kind of created a routine off of that particular stressor. So today we're going to talk about a lot of stuff. But before I get too deep into the hows and how we're going to kind of manipulate and change those behaviors, I just wanted to let you know that emotional eating is okay. It's not bad. It's a natural thing. If you think about when a baby's born, its initial reaction when it needs something is to cry. And usually that crying is a result of it being hungry, and the mother provides the nourishment so that the baby can eat and be content. So we're very deeply connected to emotions, and everything in our culture and most cultures is centered around food. Food is so ingrained in emotions, in celebrations and events, that it's normal for us to turn to food for comfort, to turn to food for something. You know, if we feel a void, if we're trying to fill a void, or alleviate some sort of stress, it's normal that we would turn to food. So when we're thinking about our goals, obviously turning to food every time we are stressed, or every time we're sad, or every time we're happy isn't going to help us get to our goals a little bit faster. So there are other things that we can do that can provide us with that same sort of reward or response or relief that the food provides us. We just have to figure out what it is and figure out what it is that our body's truly craving in that moment, because it's not always going to be food. Sometimes it will, and we should honor those cravings when it happens, but not all the time is it going to be the case that we truly are craving a certain food item. So that's what we're diving into today, is developing tools in order to identify what is a true food craving and how can we start developing healthier solutions toward those emotional situations. So I'm curious if you guys can pull up your chat. Like when I say throw out the word like emotional eating, what does that? Because I know a lot of you in our questionnaires said, I do suffer from emotional eating. So what does it feel like to you, and what kind of emotional eating do you feel like you struggle with? Personally, for me, my biggest emotional eating, I used to be when I was bored, I would emotionally eat. Now I find it's more when I'm tired. Like I may have just woken up from a nap and I almost like asleep. I almost sleep eat. It's crazy. I'm still in that kind of sleepy state. It could be usually when I wake up from a nap after I have an early morning and I'm going to pick up Harley, and I know that's going to be a tough transition getting her from school to home. It's usually a little stressful in the car. Sometimes she doesn't like to get in her car seat, and I know I've got all that in the back of my head, and so it kind of clouds my judgment. I'm looking for something to give me a little bit of energy, and so I will reach for something that's very convenient. Usually it's more rapidly type dissolving, if you will, into the bloodstream type of food. So it's like cracker type thing, or, something usually a little sugary, and it took me realizing that this isn't the routine and this isn't aligning with my goals. So why am I doing this? And I had to take the step back to see what the stressor was. What am I looking for here? And I'm looking for energy. So there were a couple things that I could play around with to help me feel better in that situation. One that I've developed is caffeine. So caffeine can be a very healthy option for energy. And I would do it in the form of tea, because tea doesn't quite make me as awake at nighttime. So it's usually like that 2:00 time frame. Another option is to actually just get up and move around a little bit, and like divert myself from that initial reaction. And then once I would find that, I would allow myself to kind of wake up, take a couple big deep breaths, and like just do something else. I wasn't hungry at all. It was just kind of that, all of that stuff going on in your head. And that's a natural thing to happen at that time of day. So that's kind of my personal example. And I see that Julie, you mentioned that boredom, stress, celebration, those are all like so intertwined, very different like areas, but usually the resulting behaviors are going to be very similar. So what I want to kind of start shifting to is just talking about why we emotionally eat. It's to divert our brain, and whatever we're experiencing in that moment. Either we want to forget, so block out what our brain is thinking about, or just shut off our brain and participate, right? Not consciously be involved in the food process, but just participate like in a celebration, not necessarily thinking about what's happening, just eating. So emotional eating is very habit-based, and everything that we are doing in this program is all habit-based. So luckily, with some hard work and some digging, we can create new habits that will replace that routine that we currently use. as that reward system for ourselves. So when we talk about habit change and like with regard to emotional eating, there are three different components that kind of go into the whole experience of emotional eating. It's a routine. So for me, it would have been getting up from the couch and going to the pantry, opening up, looking for something starchy in there to eat. It's the reward. The reward was that immediate energy boost, or like feeling like a little bit of a relief, or just something to kind of like shift where my brain was from that foggy waking up state to now like having to go do things. And then we have to think about the cue. So what happened way, 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 way back before I was even asleep to kind of trigger that whole cascade of events. So we've got the cue, we've got the routine, and then we've got the reward, how it makes us feel. So those are the three things that we're kind of thinking about. And you could take your own personal situations, boredom, stress, celebration, and like think about what are the cues in those situations? What are the routines that we tend to go through? And what's the reward? How does that make us feel, even if we're momentarily? Because a lot of times when we emotionally eat right, it's a instantaneous sort of reward, because we know that maybe 5 or 10 minutes later, it's not a reward feeling. It's more of a negative, like regret. Why did I do that? Those shaming type of feelings. So the first step that we have to do is identify the routine. So that's what we're doing after the cue comes, because then we can start throwing in different routines and see if there's anything that sticks that makes us feel better. So for me, it was the caffeine. Like, okay, I need a little something. Sometimes it wasn't caffeine. Sometimes it was water, like a beverage of some sort, provided me like that little bit of vitality, a little bit of like alertness that I needed to feel good, to feel back to feeling like Katie. So we have to be able to identify the routine that's we're doing after the cue. So this is typically the thing we want to change. Then we have to think about what the reward is. So that's what satisfies your craving. And a lot of times we aren't conscious of the cravings that are actually driving our routines. That's what I was saying. Like for me, I didn't know why I kept doing that. Like, oh man, I'm craving this, I'm craving this, I'm craving this, but why? Like, so it's being able to identify what we really need in that moment. And this is where we can start to use and implement different routines to see if we can isolate what that craving truly is. So if I were to wake up and instead, for my nap, instead of reaching for like a cookie, like, okay, I tried the tea, that didn't work. I was still groggy. I was still like a little stressed. If I decided to go outside for a 5-minute walk, came back in, I still wanted the snacks in the drawer, like no help. If I needed to maybe just give my mom a phone call really quick, maybe like some human interaction, like, or talk to someone, call her afterwards. Am I still feeling like I need the cookie or the cracker? No, like I feel good. So isolating the craving, like seeing what that reward is and what we're looking for and look how we're looking to feel in that situation, and then trying different routines to mimic what that reward how it makes us feel. So when we're talking about changing these routines and changing these habits, what we can change is the routine. What has to stay the same is the reward and the cue, because the cue is never going to change. Like you'll always have moments where you're stressed. You always have moments where you're sad or where you're tired. But what needs to change is what we do in between feeling tired and feeling re-energized. It's the routine that has to change. Those two things have to stay the same. So then if we think about, okay, we've got our routine, the thing that we're doing, we've got the reward, how that thing makes us feel. Now what's driving all of that? So if we go think about what that trigger is, what is leading to this emotional eating, this can be a multitude of things. It can be something instantaneous. It can be something brought on by a season. It can be something, a date driven type of event. There are many things, and it's not just one. Usually we all have many. We're very multi-layered. We've had so many life experiences. We are very unique in who we are, and what we need. So based on all of that, our cues are going to be much different. And there's going to be many of them. The good news is that developing strategies and other behaviors and learning kind of what we're craving in those situations and what we're seeking will allow us to build an array of different behaviors that we can pull from when we are feeling that particular stressor and that particular trigger. So I attached it's called the Behavior Awareness Worksheet. And this is something that you could just download and keep on your phone, and you don't have to print out a ton of copies, but maybe in your little notebook. Anytime you're feeling like a particular time of day, for me, it's the evening when I usually want like some ice cream, or in that mid-afternoon long day time frame, where I'm just a little tired. So those are 2 times that I know I've had to do work to figure out what those cues, routines, and rewards are that I'm looking for. The Behavior Awareness Worksheet will just kind of help you think about, what are you doing right now? What time of day is it? Who are you with? What are you feeling? What are you craving? Or, kind of isolate and be able to then take a step back. And I would recommend doing this anytime that you have that guilt, that feeling of shame after you eat something, because that is not how we should be feeling after we eat anything. So if you ever get in that situation, or if there was a night where, man, I did that, I don't know why, so let's figure it out. Unfortunately, this isn't a quick fix thing, but you're talking about your whole life here, and you're talking about developing routines and habits that are going to support an effortless life to execute. And doing a little bit of work and spending a little time with yourself to figure out these unique things about you is going to pay off in the long haul. So I will have some strategies for you at the end of this that are quick, that will help us mitigate that initial desire to just reach for something. This is the long haul work. This is the stuff that takes time, but it's worth it. This is where you can actually change yourself. So rather than thinking about this as being like hard work, or, you have an opportunity right now to dig deep in yourself and actually change who you are and change how you respond to certain situations and be the person that you want to be, making the choices that you want to make, not being controlled by impulses and rash decisions and, whatever those negative feelings. You don't want to feel that way about yourself. So we have the power to change that. It just takes a little bit of work, and it takes a little bit of willingness to learn a little bit about yourself. So that's just kind of a forewarning going on, but I'm totally here for your support and shooting stuff off the walls. If you're trying to figure out routines, or, Katie, this is something I always reach for, and I don't know why at this particular time of day. If that is something you're coming up against a rock or a wall with, let me help you develop new routines. Let me tell you, it could be the craziest things. Sometimes it's just we're looking for social interaction. Sometimes we're looking for a compassionate conversation. Sometimes we're looking for a friend. Sometimes we're looking for energy. Sometimes we need fresh air. And there's so many different ways that we can think about getting you that reward that don't have to be food. So it's not that food is bad, but if you're thinking about your life and making choices consistently that support the person you want to be and the goals that you have in mind, let's develop some new strategies and some new tools. It's not to say you're going to be perfect every single time. That's never my expectation for you. But it just, the more we can incorporate other options than having to rely on food, the better you're going to be. So the last thing that we would do after we have identified what the reward is you're seeking, the routine that we use to get there, and what is triggering that event, now we can create a plan. So for me, going back to my example, kind of the plan, and I'm still kind of working through this, to be honest, because I've only been with Orange Theory for 6 months and it's a new routine for me. So I'm not used to waking up at 3 in the morning every day and then having to be mom from 2 o'clock on till 7. It winds up just being a very long day. So trying to figure out a routine for myself and learn like new behaviors in this new season of my life, I'm still working through it, and I don't always make the best choices, and I still will grab some goldfish or, like I will still make choices that I'm not the most proud of, but I also give myself grace knowing that it's okay. I'm going to try and use that as feedback and collect some more data to understand that I really don't like how that makes me feel. So what else can I do that will give me the result that I'm looking for and make me feel good in the process and not make me feel meh after. So for me now, when I wake up from my nap, if I get to take them, usually I'm making it sound like I nap every day, maybe like once every 2 weeks or so. But generally it's that 2 o'clock time frame where I kind of go, crash. So while it may not be the most financially viable option, I will make an exciting little trip to a coffee shop and get just a coffee. I take my coffee with just half and half in it. I don't do sugar or anything like that because we do want to still make good choices for ourselves, right? So if we were going to Starbucks and getting a very sugar-laden, high-calorie beverage, that probably wouldn't be the best solution for my problem. But since I can pick something that is focused on mostly caffeine, gives it, I take a little of the edge off from my palate with some cream, and I've identified that as being a little bit of a pick-me-up. So I either make a tea at home or I make a trip to a coffee shop to get that little thing, that little pick-me-up, that mental pick-me-up, as much as a physical pick-me-up. And that has kind of helped me with that particular emotional eating situation that I was struggling with. So it's a beverage typically. I've also used kombucha. I've also used like a big glass of water. So for me, it is very much liquid based that makes me feel good and can kind of take that edge off for me as a replacement. Now, in order to kind of get into that routine and into that habit, I had to consciously say for the first couple weeks, I would go to Starbucks or go to Spencer's, a local coffee shop here, every day. So that was my thing. And now I've been able to get to the point where I don't have to rely on that. I can make tea at home. I can get a drink at home, and I can like step outside for a second. I can take that moment to myself to kind of re-energize. But it's really just about creating a plan of action for yourself. So if you identify a certain time of day where you are more susceptible to stress, to boredom, create a plan for yourself before that time comes so that you can solve your craving before that trigger even comes. So if you are someone who maybe, like another example might be that you walk down to, if you're working in a corporation and you have like a little cafe or something, you walk down to the cafe at the same time every day, like 3 o'clock, and you get yourself like a little cookie or a little sweet. Could it just be that you're craving movement from your office? Could it just be that you're craving social interaction from your office and talking with the barista and your coworkers that are in that same space as you at that time. So figuring out what that craving is and then developing the different sort of routines that you can use in those situations is key. But you have to be able to then make a plan and stick to it. And that's kind of the hard part. That's where making choices comes in. That's where cognitively saying, okay, I'm doing this thing. This is my plan. I've done all the work to figure it out. I have all these new routines in place. Now I have to do it. And so sometimes that's the challenging part. But the more you can just create it, challenge yourself, add it to your habit list of saying, okay, at 3 o'clock, I'm going to go grab my friend Rebecca and we're going to go take a 10-minute walk and we're going to gossip and like, I'm going to fill my cup that way. If that's what you're craving. Or if at 2 o'clock, you're going to make a cup of tea and you're going to enjoy it for 5 minutes. That's your habit. You're going to start doing that and watch how it shifts the rest of your day. So if you're someone who is sad and you reach for sweets when you're sad, and before you know it, you've already eaten the whole bag and didn't even feel like you tasted them, in that situation, you have to do the work to figure out what that trigger is. And like, how can I alleviate that? Is it having a deep conversation with a good friend for like 30 minutes on the phone the night before? Sometimes refilling your cup well before that situation arises is just as important. So it's really about identifying the cue and what is triggering that event. And that's that behavior awareness worksheet. Because then once we know what those triggers are, we know how well in advance and what we're asking for, what we need in those situations. So that's kind of the last piece of this, is after we've identified the cue, the routine, the reward, we then have to be able to make a plan and stick to it. And once you develop that plan, add it as a habit, incorporate it in your day, every day, and see how it starts to shift those cues and triggers. Do they come up as frequently? They probably won't. And then when they do, the other thing that I wanted to touch on tonight, that's going to help you in situations where maybe you don't have a particular strategy set in place for this. Maybe you find yourself reaching for something and you don't know why, you haven't done the work quite yet. I like to think of the 3 Ds. So it's delay, divert, and decide. If at any point, like, you find yourself going for something and you don't know why, it's just kind of like that reaction, or you're just doing it, delay. So just stop, know that you can come back to it later, stop and put it back, don't eat it, divert yourself. So for the next 15 minutes, spend your time doing something else, scrolling your social media, go outside, fold some laundry, take a phone call for 15 minutes. Then at the end of that 15 minutes, if you come back to that food thing and you decide that you want it, go for it. You've made that choice. You now know that you are cognizant in your decision. It's not an impulse reaction. You can eat it. So this is more of a temporary solution to a quick trigger response. It's in those situations where after that we've delayed, distracted, and decided. After that, we can then go back later and kind of do that behavior worksheet and figure out, okay, what just happened? What was I really searching for? What drove that particular craving? What was that cue? What was that trigger? What was I searching for? And what can I do instead in the future? So it's all just about data collection, and that little delay, distract, and decide can kind of help you make better choices. And this can go in any situation, but particularly with emotional eating, to be able to just hit that pause button really quick and say, like, is this something I really want? Or if I can distract myself and come back to it later, like, am I still going to want this thing? Is it that important to me right now? Is this truly my craving? So that's kind of where I go with this, is The hard work is actually identifying the cues, identifying the reward, and changing their routine. Quick solutions to kind of get you through is the delay, divert, or distract, and decide. So with those two tools in mind, you can really start making some significant changes in the way that you're handling these situations and how you're reacting to certain stressors. So I'm really excited to kind of see you start to implement, and you can start with the low hanging fruit, right? Maybe some things that you always reach for, and you kind of tend to reach for it at the same time of day, or in the same sort of situations. Let's really start to think about why that is. Use your behavior worksheet. Let's start thinking about other routines, other behaviors. In fact, I'm going to start a post on Facebook with a bunch of ideas, and then I want you guys to just think of other things that you might find as beneficial or helpful as a replacement routine for someone who might be searching for something else. Not everyone is looking for the same sort of reward, right? Not everyone is looking for compassion, or not everyone is looking for like stress relief. Not everyone, everyone has different things. So think about all the different things that could provide you with that sort of reward for a bunch of different situations. And by the end of that, we're going to have so many different options to kind of weed through and throw it at the wall and see if any of them stick. It may be something you never even knew that could provide you with that sort of reward. So I'm really excited to see kind of how this mental shift starts playing out for you. I think it's so important to start spending the time, as challenging as it is, with ourselves. Use that delay, distract, decide as a temporary solution. But let's really start getting into the nitty-gritty of why we're doing certain things, when we're doing it, and what can we do instead. So that's all I have for you tonight. If you have any other questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or on the Facebook group. But I am going to save this video. I will upload it to YouTube and then attach the link here because the videos are too big when I try to go and post them on Facebook. So habits, as a reminder for the week, is to eat a healthy fat with each meal. Let me know how that's going for you. If you have any issues, sometimes healthy fats can be challenging for us to get in. We get stuck in I get stuck in an avocado root because it's so easy, so simple to implement. And sometimes we get a little heavy on the healthy fats, right? They're so great, but you do have to be kind of mindful of how much you're using because they are so calorie dense. So that's why we say the thumbful is technically a serving. Now, if you are not working out a ton, generally you can be a little heavier on the healthy fats, just a little, not a ton, and you'll be a little lighter on your carbohydrate. That's how we would kind of shift on a day where we're not as active. We would want to support our body with a little bit more protein, a little bit more veggies, and a little bit healthier fats, and not quite as much carbohydrate. On days where we're very active, it does the other thing. So your protein, veggies stay the same. Carbohydrate might go up a little bit and your healthy fat would come down. Healthy fats and carbohydrates have kind of a relationship like this. So just be mindful of that. Those are like small details that we worry about much later on. Right now, if you can just focus on getting a serving of healthy fat in with each of your meals, that's a huge win. I think that is all I have, ladies, tonight. Yeah, I'm going to throw this information in the Facebook group, all of my notes, for you to refer back to. And then I will attach this video as well. And I can't wait to hear some of the ideas that we've got for different routines that can kind of help us step away from always relying on food to solve our emotions. So that is it, y'all. Have a great night, and I will chat with you next week. Bye.